The reality is Pam Bondi has obfuscated for months. She first said there were no more documents to be seen. Now she's admitting and releasing hundreds of thousands of documents, but it is an incomplete release with too many redactions.
Congress just dropped impeachment papers on Donald Trump, and what's happening right now is absolutely explosive. We're not talking about threats or speculation or political posturing. We're talking about actual impeachment resolutions filed in the House of Representatives charging Trump with high crimes and misdemeanors. We're talking about members of Congress from both parties drafting new papers to hold Trump's Attorney General in contempt with the possibility of fines and even jail for defying federal law. We're talking about a federal judge finding probable cause to hold Trump administration officials in criminal contempt for ignoring court orders. This is real. This is documented. And the legal pressure on Trump and his inner circle is getting worse by the day. I'm going to walk you through exactly what papers have been filed, who's facing potential jail time, and why this dual squeeze from Congress and the courts is creating the most serious legal threat Trump has faced in his entire presidency. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built John Brown's show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. And seriously, check right now if you're actually subscribed to this channel, because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what's actually happening. First, the impeachment papers against Trump himself. April 28, 2025. House Resolution 353 gets introduced in the House of Representatives. The official title, Impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. And it lays out 7 articles of impeachment. Article 1, Obstruction of Justice. Article 2, Usurpation of Congress's appropriations power. Article 3, Abuse of trade powers. Article 4, Violation of First Amendment rights. Article 5, Creating an unlawful office. Article 6, Bribery and corruption. Article 7, Tyranny. 7 formal charges filed in Congress, on the record, accusing the sitting president of high crimes and misdemeanors, including tyranny. That's not hyperbole. That's official congressional language in an impeachment resolution. And that's not the only one. Michigan Democrat Sri Thanadar filed his own articles around the same time. 7 articles including unlawful deportation, abuse of tariff powers, attacks on journalists, tyrannical overreach, centralizing unchecked authority, all formal charges against Trump. So you've got multiple impeachment resolutions, multiple sets of articles, all filed in the first few months of Trump's second term, all accusing him of serious abuse of power and violations of law, all sitting there in the congressional record. But here's the problem. Republicans control the House, so these resolutions get blocked, get tabled, never get real hearings or votes on the merits, just procedural kills that make them go away without actually addressing whether the charges are true. Then December 11th, another impeachment resolution, this one led by Representative Al Green, accusing Trump of suggesting execution of members of Congress, of undermining judicial independence by attacking judges online, of promoting violence and hate, of threatening democracy itself. And this one actually got a vote, sort of. Republicans moved to table it, which is the procedural way of killing it without debating the substance, and the motion to table passed. All Republicans voted to kill it. Even 23 Democrats voted against advancing it. So the resolution died. But the fact that it got to the floor, the fact that there was a vote, the fact that impeachment resolutions keep getting filed throughout 2025, that shows sustained pressure. Shows Democrats repeatedly saying this president's conduct warrants removal. Shows impeachment isn't a one-time thing, but an ongoing threat. Now let me bring the receipts on what's happening with Pam Bondi and the Epstein files, because this is where the jail threat becomes concrete. November 19th, 2025, Congress passes H.R. 4405, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Bipartisan support. The law requires the Department of Justice to release all Epstein-related records within 30 days, full transparency. Everything the Justice Department has. That's what the law says. Trump signs it, makes a big show of supporting transparency, claims he wants everything out there. And then his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, immediately starts violating the law. December 19th, the 30-day deadline. DOJ releases maybe 1% of the files. Heavily redacted, incomplete, missing materials, missing at least one Trump photo that should have been included. Way short of full release, way short of what the law required. And Congress is furious, because this isn't a suggestion, this is federal law. Congress passed it, Trump signed it, and his DOJ is just ignoring it, releasing a fraction of what's required, claiming they need more time, saying full release will come later, even though the law said 30 days. The Hill reported on December 19th that Representative Ro Khanna said Congress is eyeing possible impeachment over this, that lawmakers are discussing impeachment of DOJ officials who are defying the Epstein files law, that this violation of federal statute could trigger impeachment proceedings. Then NBC News reported on December 21st, interview with Khanna and Representative Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky. And they're going further. They're not just talking about impeachment, they're talking about inherent contempt. Inherent contempt is Congress's power to enforce its own orders, to find people who defy Congress, to potentially jail people who refuse to comply. It's rare, it's serious, but it's a real power Congress has, and Khanna and Massie are telling NBC they're exploring this. They're discussing fines for each day. Bondi delays release of documents. They're talking about contempt proceedings. They're talking about jail as a possibility if she continues defying Congress. And Fortune reported they've begun drafting articles of impeachment and inherent contempt against Bondi. Think about that for a second. 2 members of Congress, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, working together, drafting formal papers that could lead to the Attorney General being impeached or being held in contempt or being fined daily until she complies or potentially facing jail if contempt proceedings move forward. That's not theoretical. That's active drafting. That's preparation for formal action. That's Congress getting ready to use its most serious powers against Trump's Attorney General for defying a law Trump himself signed. And the Epstein angle makes this explosive because everyone wants to know what's in those files. What names appear, what connections exist, what's being hidden, and when Bondi's DOJ releases 1%, heavily redacted, way past deadline, it looks like a cover-up. Axios reported that at least 1 Trump photo is missing from what was released. Time covered how survivors and lawmakers are criticizing the incomplete release. ABC News documented Democrats examining legal options after DOJ's failure to provide full files. The anger is bipartisan. The sense that Bondi is hiding something is widespread, and now Congress is preparing to act. Impeachment papers, contempt papers, fines, potentially jail, all because Bondi won't comply with the law Congress passed and Trump signed. That's real legal jeopardy, real consequences being prepared. Now let's talk about the other side of the squeeze, the courts. Because while Congress is drafting impeachment and contempt papers, federal judges are building their own cases against Trump's team. April 16, 2025, Chief Judge James Boasberg issues an opinion, and it's devastating for Trump's team. He finds probable cause to hold Trump administration defendants in criminal contempt for willful disregard of his order. Here's the background. Trump used the Alien Enemies Act to deport certain individuals. Boasberg issued an order blocking some of those deportations, said the administration had to follow proper procedures, had to give people due process before flying them out of the country. And Trump's team just ignored the order, flew people out anyway, before courts could intervene, before legal challenges could be heard, just deported them in defiance of a federal judge's explicit order. And Boasberg's opinion says that's willful disregard, that's contempt of court, and he finds probable cause for criminal contempt, which is the first step toward actual sanctions, toward fines, toward potential jail time for officials who defied the court. House Resolution 415, one of the impeachment resolutions, quotes Boasberg's opinion, uses his findings as basis for impeachment charges, says Trump's contempt of court, his administration defying judicial orders, that's an impeachable offense. And Boasberg went further in his opinion. He said, and I'm quoting, If the executive can deport without legal consequence as long as they do it before courts can intervene, there's no assurance they won't later target U.S. citizens or political enemies. That's a federal judge warning that Trump's contempt of court could lead to targeting Americans for political reasons. That's serious. That's a judge saying this isn't just about immigration. This is about whether any court order means anything, whether the executive branch is bound by judicial decisions, whether rule of law exists. And Boasberg found probable cause for criminal contempt, which means he thinks there's enough evidence to proceed with contempt proceedings, to potentially sanction officials, to potentially jail them if they continue defying orders. Now, a 3-judge appeals panel temporarily halted Boasberg's contempt inquiry, gave the administration a reprieve while litigation continues, but they didn't dismiss it, didn't say Boasberg was wrong, just paused it temporarily. So the contempt threat is still there, still hanging over Trump officials who defied the deportation order. Still possible that contempt proceedings resume and lead to sanctions or jail. The reprieve is temporary. The legal jeopardy remains. The New York Times covered this, how the Justice Department is seeking to halt the contempt inquiry, but how it's still active, how Boasberg's findings remain on the record, how this creates ongoing legal exposure for deportation officials. So let me explain what this dual squeeze actually means. You've got the legislative branch filing impeachment papers, drafting contempt proceedings, threatening fines and jail for defying the Epstein Files law. That's one source of pressure. And you've got the judicial branch finding probable cause for criminal contempt over deportation flights, building cases for sanctions or jail for defying court orders. That's another source of pressure. These are independent, they're not coordinated, but they're both happening at once, both creating legal jeopardy for Trump's administration, both building toward potential consequences that include fines or jail. And when you're squeezed from both sides like that, when Congress and courts are both moving toward accountability, that's when the legal jeopardy becomes really serious, because you can't just ignore one branch when the other is also coming at you. Trump might be able to stonewall Congress because Republicans protect him, but he can't stonewall courts the same way. Judges can hold officials in contempt, can issue sanctions, can enforce their orders through the legal system, congressional votes can be blocked, judicial orders can't be blocked the same way. Now let's talk about what makes the Khanna-Massey partnership so significant. When a Democrat and a Republican are working together on impeachment and contempt papers, that's unusual. That's noteworthy. That suggests this isn't just partisan warfare. Massey is a Republican. He's conservative. He's not a never-Trumper who opposes everything Trump does, but he's working with Khanna on this because the Epstein Files law violation is so clear, so egregious, so bipartisan in terms of Congress demanding transparency. And that bipartisan cooperation makes the threat more credible, makes it harder for Trump to dismiss as partisan attacks, makes it more likely that action might actually follow. Because when both parties agree something's wrong, the political pressure to act increases. If this was just Khanna, Democrats could be dismissed. But Khanna plus Massey, that's Democrats and Republicans agreeing Bondi needs to be held accountable. That's harder to spin, harder to ignore, more politically dangerous. Now let me explain what inherent contempt actually is, because most people don't know Congress has this power. It's the ability to enforce its own requirements, to find people who defy congressional authority, to potentially jail them for continued non-compliance. It's rarely used, it's controversial, but it's real, and it doesn't require courts. Congress can act on its own authority, can hold hearings, can find someone in contempt, can impose fines, can even jail them in the Capitol if contempt continues. That's a nuclear option. That's Congress asserting its authority in the most direct way possible. And Khanna and Massey exploring this, drafting papers, getting ready to potentially use this power, that's serious. If they actually do it, if they find Bondi in inherent contempt and start fining her daily, that's unprecedented in modern politics. That's Congress using powers it hasn't used in over a century. That's a constitutional showdown. And the jail threat becomes real at that point. Not theoretical, not distant, but actual possibility if Bondi continues refusing to release files Congress ordered released by law. Speaking on CBS's Face the Nation, Massey said the fastest way to justice for Epstein's victims would be the use of inherent contempt against the Attorney General. He argued that Congress must act decisively if the department continues to delay disclosure. Think about what that means. A Republican congressman is saying Congress should use its most extreme power against Trump's Attorney General, should fine her daily, should potentially jail her if she keeps defying the law. That's not partisan hysteria. That's a conservative Republican saying Bondi's violation of the Epstein transparency law is so serious that Congress needs to use powers it hasn't used in over a century. Now let's talk about what this means for Trump personally, because while the jail threat isn't for Trump directly right now, when your inner circle is facing potential jail, when your attorney general might be impeached, when federal judges are finding probable cause for contempt, that creates massive pressure on the president himself. Because if Bondi goes down over Epstein files, what does that say about Trump's role in hiding those files? If deportation officials face contempt, what does that say about Trump's orders that led to court defiance? The legal jeopardy for his team becomes political, and legal jeopardy for him. And here's the thing about Bondi's situation. She's only defying the law because Trump wants her to. The decision to release 1% heavily redacted isn't Bondi acting alone. That's coordinated with the White House. That's Trump's strategy for managing Epstein files. Bondi is just the one implementing it, so if Bondi faces impeachment or contempt or jail over Epstein files, she's facing consequences for doing what Trump wanted. And that creates pressure on Trump. Does he let his attorney general take the fall? Does he pardon her if she faces criminal contempt? Does he fire her to create distance? None of those options are good. Letting her face consequences looks weak. Pardoning her looks like cover-up. Firing her looks like she's a scapegoat. Trump's backed into a corner by his own strategy of defying the Epstein files law. Now let's look at the pattern here, because this isn't just about one law or one court order. Trump's team is defying Congress on Epstein files, defying courts on deportation orders. That's a pattern. That's systematic contempt for other branches of government. That's treating legal requirements as optional. And when you establish that pattern, when you show you'll ignore Congress and courts whenever convenient, you invite escalation. You invite both branches to use their most serious powers. Because normal compliance mechanisms aren't working, Congress passes laws. Trump's DOJ ignores them. Courts issue orders. Trump's officials defy them. At some point, Congress and courts have to escalate to maintain their authority, have to use contempt powers, have to threaten fines or jail, because nothing else is working. So the jail threat emerges from Trump's own strategy of defiance. If he'd complied with the Epstein files law, no contempt threat. If his officials had followed Boasberg's order, no criminal contempt finding. The consequences are self-inflicted. Now let me show you what lawmakers are actually saying about this. A political firestorm has erupted in Washington over the release of Epstein files. Lawmakers from both Republicans and Democrats are accusing the Justice Department of withholding evidence and failing to meet a congressionally mandated deadline. Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna and Republican Congressman Thomas Massey say they are now discussing holding Attorney General Pam Bondi in contempt after the Justice Department missed the Friday deadline to release all eligible Epstein-related documents. Notice what they're saying. They're discussing holding Bondi in contempt, not just criticizing her, not just complaining, actually using congressional power to hold her accountable. They say they are considering looking into the possibility of impeachment proceedings, contempt, even criminal referrals for obstruction of justice for DOJ officials. Think about what that means. Criminal referrals for obstruction of justice. That's Congress saying Bondi and other DOJ officials might have committed crimes by defying the transparency law. That's not political rhetoric. That's potential criminal charges. And one lawmaker said, quote, "The reality is Pam Bondi has obfuscated for months. She first said there were no more documents to be seen. Now she's admitting and releasing hundreds of thousands of documents, but it is an incomplete release with too many redactions." That's lawmakers catching Bondi in contradictions. First, she said there's nothing left to release. Now she's releasing hundreds of thousands of documents, which means she lied the first time. She said there was nothing when there clearly was something. And even now, what she's releasing is incomplete with too many redactions. So she's still not complying with the law, still hiding information, still defying Congress, and that's why Congress is preparing to act. Now let's talk about what happens if Congress actually follows through on inherent contempt, if they find Bondi in contempt, if they start fining her daily for continued non-compliance. The mechanism works like this. Congress holds a hearing, presents evidence that Bondi violated the law, votes to hold her in contempt, then imposes sanctions. Could be a fine, could be $10,000 per day until she complies, could escalate to jail if she continues refusing. That's real money, that's real consequences, and it doesn't require a trial, doesn't require the Justice Department to prosecute. Congress can do this on its own authority. That's what makes inherent contempt so powerful and so rare, because it's Congress acting as judge, jury, and enforcer all at once, using power that exists in the Constitution but hasn't been used in modern times. If Kana and Massey actually go through with this, if they get enough support, if they hold hearings and vote and find Bondi in contempt, that's unprecedented. That's a constitutional crisis. That's Congress and the executive branch in direct confrontation. And the question becomes, does Bondi comply when faced with daily fines? Or does she keep defying Congress and face escalating consequences? Neither option is good for Trump. If she complies, she releases files Trump wanted hidden. If she doesn't comply, she faces fines and potentially jail, making Trump look weak for not protecting his attorney general. Now let's connect this to the broader picture, because these aren't isolated incidents. The impeachment papers against Trump, the contempt proceedings against Bondi, the court contempt findings over deportations, all of this together paints a picture of a system under stress, of institutions pushing back, of democracy straining but not breaking. Trump's in power, but he's not unopposed. He's winning battles, but he's paying a price. He's achieving goals, but creating enemies and resistance that will haunt him. And that resistance has consequences. Not immediately, not obviously, but over time. As more people get fed up, as more officials push back, as more precedents get set for opposing presidential overreach. Trump's building a coalition of opponents across every branch of government and every level of society. That coalition might not be enough to stop him now, but it's there. It's organized, it's practiced, and it's waiting for Trump to make a mistake, for his support to erode, for an opportunity to strike back more effectively. These impeachment papers and contempt proceedings, they're that coalition announcing itself, showing its strength, demonstrating it won't go quietly, signaling to everyone watching, resistance is not futile, opposition is real, democracy is still fighting. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown's show, because this story is far from over. We're going to keep tracking these impeachment papers. We're going to keep documenting the contempt proceedings against Bondi. We're going to keep following the court contempt cases, because this is the biggest threat Trump has faced, not from one branch, but from two. Not from one party, but from bipartisan coalitions. Not theoretical, but active, real, documented. Congress has dropped impeachment papers charging Trump with 7 counts, including tyranny. Congress is drafting contempt papers against Bondi with potential for daily fines and jail. Courts have found probable cause for criminal contempt of Trump officials who defied orders. The squeeze is tightening from both sides. The legal jeopardy is escalating. And the question is no longer if consequences will come, but when, and how severe they'll be. Share this video with everyone you know, because people need to understand what's happening. This isn't speculation. This isn't political theater. These are actual impeachment resolutions filed in Congress. These are actual contempt proceedings being prepared. These are actual court findings of probable cause for criminal contempt. The papers have been dropped. The jail threats are real. And Trump's team is facing the most serious legal pressure of his entire presidency. From Congress, from courts, from both sides at once. This is the dual squeeze. This is institutions fighting back. This is democracy refusing to surrender. And the consequences are coming. Not tomorrow, but soon. The only question is whether Trump's team will comply with the law, or whether they'll keep defying Congress and courts until the jail threats become jail realities. This story continues. Stay tuned.